Imagine working tirelessly every night at your favorite restaurant, balancing plates and dreams, only to be unexpectedly challenged by an arrogant tycoon who doubts your abilities. This is the compelling reality faced by Lily Thompson, a dedicated waitress with a hidden passion for music. What began as an attempt to undermine her turned into a transformative moment that silenced the room and shattered egos. You won't believe how she turned the tables with nothing but her talent. Before we dive into Lily's powerful journey, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Let's get started. On a pleasant Saturday evening, the vibrant hum of conversation echoed through the Silver Maple, a high-end restaurant located in the heart of Asheville, North Carolina. The sound of clinking glasses, the soft footsteps of servers, and the gentle melodies of jazz coming from a corner piano created an atmosphere of sophisticated comfort. The restaurant was famous not only for its delicious cuisine but also for its stylish decor, featuring soft lighting, comfortable seating, and a beautiful display of fine china and crystal glassware. Lily Thompson, a 23-year-old black waitress with a quiet demeanor and an unmistakable spark in her eyes, moved swiftly between tables, balancing plates and smiles. To most patrons, she was just another face in uniform, but inside, she carried dreams bigger than the luxurious dining room around her. Lily's passion wasn't serving tables, it was music. Ever since she was a child, the piano had been her refuge, a place where she could express every joy, every sorrow, and every unspoken thought. But dreams don't pay the bills. Working long shifts at the Silver Maple was a necessity, a stepping stone toward the music academy she longed to attend. Few knew about her talent except for the restaurant staff, who occasionally caught her stealing moments at the old upright piano in the back room during breaks. Lily's daily routine was a delicate balance of serving demanding customers and nurturing her musical aspirations. Every night after her shifts, she would return to her modest apartment, a small space cluttered with sheet music, practice books, and a second-hand keyboard she had bought with her savings. Despite the cramped quarters, the piano remained the centerpiece, a constant reminder of her dreams. That night, as the evening rush filled the restaurant with vibrant energy, the door opened with deliberate intent, and Ethan Blackwell stepped in, exuding an air of undeniable authority. Instantly recognizable, the wealthy tycoon made an entrance like he owned the room, flanked by a few equally polished companions. Ethan exuded an air of superiority, known for his sharp tongue and penchant for spectacle. His presence made even the most seasoned staff stand straighter. Lily's colleagues exchanged knowing glances. Ethan was not an easy guest. He thrived on pushing people's buttons. For Lily, though he was just another table to manage in a long night's work, this wasn't going to be a normal evening. Ethan had a reputation for his extravagant dining experiences, often accompanied by loud conversations and ostentatious displays of wealth. His entourage consisted of similarly affluent individuals who seemed more interested in showing off their status than enjoying their meals. As Lily approached his table, she could feel the tension in the air, an unspoken challenge that hung between them. As Ethan scanned the room, his gaze landed on Lily. Something about her seemed to catch his attention, a momentary pause, then a smirk. Lily felt the weight of his stare but brushed it off, focusing instead on refilling water glasses and clearing plates. But Ethan wasn't done with her. He'd already decided she was going to be his entertainment for the night. Lily had grown up in a small town in Tennessee, where dreams of grandeur often felt as distant as the stars. Her mother, a single parent and a tireless caregiver, had taken on the role of sole provider after a difficult divorce, caused by years of arguments and the strain of their harsh circumstances. She worked double shifts as a nurse to ensure Lily and her siblings had food on the table despite their modest means. Music had always been a constant in their home. Her mother's old vinyl records and the out-of-tune piano gifted by a neighbor were the seeds of Lily's love for melody. That piano became her escape. While other kids played outside, Lily spent hours teaching herself to play. She mimicked the songs on the radio, then ventured into classical pieces she found in second-hand music books. Her talent didn't go unnoticed. She played at church, school recitals, and community events, but recognition couldn't mask the financial hurdles that loomed over her dreams. By the time she turned 18, the reality was clear: a professional music career would have to wait. Scholarships didn't come through, and family responsibilities took precedence. Lily packed away her concert ambitions, replacing them with the practicality of earning a living. Yet, she couldn't entirely give up. The piano was more than a dream, it was her identity. When she moved to Asheville a few years ago, Lily took on various jobs to make ends meet. She worked as a house cleaner, a part-time tutor, and even a cashier at a local convenience store. Each role taught her resilience, but none felt like the right fit. Eventually, she sought out a job at the Silver Maple, not just because of the pay but because of the grand piano tucked into the corner of the restaurant. Even though she rarely had time to play, just knowing it was there gave her a sense of comfort. Music hadn't left her, it was simply waiting. That night, as Ethan and his entourage took their seats, Lily approached their table, balancing a tray with practiced grace. Ethan ordered a top-shelf scotch and cracked a joke loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Lily offered a polite smile as she took their orders, her voice steady despite the strange energy radiating from him. "Ethan?" Lily said, glancing at her name tag. "Sounds like someone with a lot of hidden talents." The comment caught her off guard, but she nodded politely and stepped away to place their orders. She didn't notice the knowing grin he shared with his companion, nor the way his eyes followed her every move. But Ethan wasn't just observing, he was planning, and Lily would soon find herself at the center of a spectacle she never asked for. Before Ethan began his verbal attacks, it was evident that his actions were driven by his own past disappointments in the music industry. Years of striving for recognition without success had left him with a sense of bitterness and a desire to assert his superiority over others. Seeing Lily's composed demeanor and the quiet confidence she carried sparked something unsettling in him, as if she represented the hope and ambition he had long buried. Though he had no way of knowing her full potential, the mere possibility of her having untapped talent was enough to provoke him, leading him to challenge her as a way to cope with his own frustrations. The night carried on like any other, with the hum of laughter and silverware filling the room. Lily Thompson kept her pace steady, avoiding Ethan Blackwell's gaze as she moved between tables. She dealt with difficult customers before, but something about him felt different, not just rude but calculated. His presence loomed like a shadow, making her uneasy in a way she couldn't quite shake. By the time the appetizers were served, Ethan had already started his performance, though not the kind Lily expected. He held court at his table, loudly recounting tales of his success and peppering in jabs about people who lacked ambition. His entourage laughed dutifully while other diners shot annoyed glances in his direction. Lily tried to stay focused on her tasks, but as she returned to his table with a bottle of wine, Ethan caught her off guard. "Tell me, Lily," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "What do you do when you're not carrying plates? Surely a young woman like you has dreams." His words stopped her mid-passage. Lily hesitated, then gave a careful answer. "I play piano sometimes," she said softly, hoping to keep it brief. Ethan's eyes lit up, and a sly smile curled across his lips. "A pianist, huh? How fascinating. Why don't you give us a little performance?" Lily froze. The room seemed to quiet, the weight of his words hanging in the air. She glanced briefly at her co-workers, who gave her encouraging nods and subtle smiles. Taking a deep breath, she felt the familiar anxiety rise in her chest, but also a surge of determination. She had faced doubts and challenges before, and this was just another obstacle to overcome. "Oh, I couldn't," she said quickly, forcing a nervous laugh. "I'm just here to work tonight." But Ethan wasn't about to let it go. "Nonsense," he declared, his voice booming. "There's a piano right there in the corner. Show us what you've got. Surely a future star like you isn't afraid of a little audience." His companions chuckled, clearly enjoying the show. Other diners turned their heads, curious about the commotion. Lily's chest tightened. She could feel the heat of their stares, the silent judgment waiting to unfold. She wanted to say no, to walk away, but Ethan's challenge hung in the air, daring her to rise to it or crumble under its weight. "I really shouldn't," Lily stammered, glancing around for support. But even her colleagues seemed hesitant to intervene. Sarah, a fellow waitress and Lily's closest friend, noticed the tension building between Lily and Ethan. With a reassuring smile, Sarah offered silent support, occasionally giving Lily a thumbs up or a nod of encouragement from across the room. Their friendship provided Lily with the emotional backing she needed to stay strong during the challenging evening. Ethan leaned back in his chair, sipping his scotch with a smirk. "Ah," he said mockingly. "All talk, no talent. That's disappointing." Ethan raised his glass and swirled his drink nonchalantly, as if he had already proven his point. "I expected better," he added with a dismissive shrug, his gaze fixed on Lily like a hunter sizing up his prey. The words hit like a slap. Lily's hands clenched at her side. She wasn't one to seek confrontation, but the way he dismissed her like she was a joke, a nobody, cut deeper than she expected. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Never let anyone make you small. Lily, you're bigger than they'll ever know." A moment of silence stretched between them. Lily glanced at the piano, then back at Ethan. His smug expression dared her to take the bait, and against her better judgment, she did. "Fine," she said, her voice steady but low. "I'll play." The room bristled with anticipation as Lily walked toward the piano, each step carrying the weight of both fear and defiance. The dining room seemed to hold its breath as Lily approached the gleaming grand piano. The soft glow of the chandelier above cast a spotlight on her, isolating her from the murmuring crowd. Her fingers trembled as she slid onto the bench, the polished keys gleaming like a challenge waiting to be met. Behind her, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the picture of smug satisfaction, as though he had already won whatever game he was playing. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely think. This wasn't the church recital or the cozy community gatherings she'd once known, this was different, this was hostile. But there was no turning back now. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool surface beneath her fingertips. The first notes were soft, hesitant, almost fragile. A few diners shifted in their seats, and someone coughed in the back of the room. Lily ignored them, her focus sharpening as she leaned into the music. She chose a piece she knew by heart, a soulful rendition of Clair de Lune by Debussy. The melody spilled into the room, weaving through the air like a thread, delicate but unyielding. As her confidence grew, the music swelled. Her hands moved with a grace that belied the chaos inside her, the notes pouring out like a confession. Each chord seemed to carry a piece of her story, the sacrifices her mother made, the nights she spent practicing in a cramped room, the weight of dreams deferred but never abandoned. The diners fell silent, their earlier chatter replaced by a collective stillness. Even Ethan, who had been whispering to his companions, went quiet. Lily didn't need to look at him to feel the shift in the room. The mocking energy had dissipated, replaced by something she couldn't quite name, perhaps awe, perhaps humility. The music soared, and Lily let herself go for the first time in what felt like years. She wasn't a waitress or a struggling dreamer, she was simply herself, an artist. Her fingers danced across the keys, drawing out emotions so raw and vivid they seemed to hang in the air like smoke. By the time she struck the final chord, the room was utterly still. For a moment, there was no sound, just the lingering resonance of the piano. Lily sat frozen, her hand still resting on the keys, unsure of what would come next. Then, as though released from a spell, the audience erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, reverberating off the walls and filling the room with a warmth Lily hadn't expected. Some diners stood, clapping with a fervor that brought tears to her eyes. Her co-workers, who had been watching from the sidelines, joined in, their faces lit with pride. Ethan, however, remained seated. His smirk was gone, replaced by an expression Lily couldn't quite decipher, part shock, part discomfort. He raised his hands and clapped slowly, a hollow sound compared to the cheers around him. But even his hesitant applause couldn't overshadow what Lily had just done. She had reclaimed her voice, and no amount of condescension could take that away. As the applause began to fade, the room seemed to exhale collectively. Lily slowly stood, her knees still trembling but her back straight. She glanced around, and for the first time that evening, she truly saw the people watching her, not as spectators but as witnesses. Their expressions carried something new: admiration, respect, and even a hint of awe. She didn't look at Ethan right away. Instead, she gave a small, polite nod to the diners who had clapped the loudest, her lips curving into a faint smile. It wasn't pride she felt, but relief that she hadn't let fear silence her. But then, as though magnetized, her gaze shifted to Ethan. He was still seated, his hands clasped in front of him on the table. The confident smirk he'd worn so brazenly earlier was nowhere to be seen. Instead, his face was a mask of forced neutrality, as though he couldn't decide whether to admit his misstep or double down on his arrogance. "Well," Ethan finally said, his voice louder than it needed to be, breaking the fragile silence that had settled over the room. "That was unexpected." He chuckled lightly, though it lacked its usual bravado. "I suppose talent really does come from the most surprising places." The comment landed like a dull thud. His companions exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Lily tilted her head slightly, studying him. His words were meant to be an olive branch, but they were hollow, weighed down by his inability to truly own the moment. "Thank you," Lily said, her tone steady and deliberate. There was no warmth in her voice, but no hostility either. She wasn't about to let him pull her back into the smallness he'd tried to impose. Her performance had spoken louder than any rebuttal she could offer. Ethan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the room's collective gaze. He gestured toward the waiter for another drink, a flimsy attempt to regain his composure. "You've got quite a gift," he added almost begrudgingly. Lily nodded once, her gaze unwavering. "Everyone has a gift," she said, the weight of her words deliberate. "It's how you choose to use it that matters." The room seemed to hold its breath again, the subtle sting of her response rippling through the air. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was enough. Ethan shifted in his seat, his usual air of dominance slipping further with each passing second. The diners began to turn their attention back to their meals, though the energy in the room had shifted entirely. Where there had once been the quiet hum of privilege and pretense, there was now something richer, a shared understanding, perhaps, even respect for the waitress who had reminded everyone of the power of authenticity. But Ethan wasn't just humiliated, he was exposed. And no amount of charm could shield him from the truth. Everyone in the room now saw Lily. She stepped away from the piano, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. Her colleagues greeted her with quiet smiles and subtle nods of encouragement. As she returned to her station, she still had a job to finish, but something about her posture had changed. Her head was held a little higher, her movements more deliberate. Ethan's table had quieted his entourage, who had laughed so freely at her expense earlier now avoided eye contact. Their conversation subdued, the bravado that once filled their corner of the restaurant had evaporated, leaving only an awkward silence in its place. The night continued, but Lily felt lighter. Each step she took through the dining room felt more purposeful, her confidence blooming in a way she hadn't expected. As she refilled glasses and cleared plates, patrons stopped her to offer kind words. "You're incredible," one older woman said softly. "I don't think I've ever heard anything so moving." "Keep going," another man added. "You've got something special. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily thanked them with quiet humility, her heart swelling with gratitude. These weren't just compliments, they were validations of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of becoming. Ethan, however, was not so gracious. As Lily approached his table to deliver the check, he looked up at her with an expression that teetered between annoyance and reluctant admiration. "You've made your point," he said, his tone clipped. "No need to rub it in." Lily paused, meeting his gaze directly. "It was never about proving anything to you," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I just wanted to play." Ethan had no response. He fidgeted with his drink, his once commanding presence reduced to an awkward shuffle. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone at the table knew it. As Ethan scribbled his signature on the check, one of his companions, a younger man with a softer demeanor, looked at Lily and said, "You were amazing." Truly, the sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of humanity in a group she had written off as shallow. "Thank you," she replied, offering a small smile before walking away. With a steady composure, she made her way back to the counter. Looking at Lily's radiant expression after her performance, Ethan began to feel a strange sense of unease. The self-assured smugness he had carried all evening now seemed hollow. Her music had awakened something buried within him, memories of his own failures and the bitterness that had consumed him. For the first time in years, Ethan wondered if he could let go of the arrogance he had built as a shield and embrace a more honest version of himself. The night ended with Ethan and his group leaving quietly, their usual grand exit replaced by a hasty retreat. Lily watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness. She wasn't thinking about Ethan anymore, her mind was already on the next step. The tips from that night were unusually generous, enough to cover her rent and leave a little extra for piano lessons she'd been postponing. As she locked up and walked home, the crisp air filling her lungs, Lily felt something she hadn't felt in years: certainty. She wasn't just a waitress, and she wasn't just a dreamer, she was an artist. And nothing, no mocking words, no financial struggles, no fear, could take that away from her. On her way home, her thoughts weren't on the night's conflict or Ethan's condescension, they were on the future, where her dreams finally felt closer than ever. Once inside her small apartment, she set her belongings aside and sat on the worn bench in the corner. Her fingers glided over the keys of her old upright piano, filling the room with familiar melodies. The sound wasn't as crisp or rich as the grand piano at the Silver Maple, but it didn't matter. The music came from her heart, just as it always had. That night, something shifted within her, not just a moment of triumph, but a realization that her talent wasn't something she needed to hide or justify. It was hers, and it was enough. For years, she had let fear and doubt whisper lies into her mind, telling her she wasn't enough, that her dreams were too big. But now she saw the truth: resilience and authenticity were her greatest strengths. The incident with Ethan Blackwell wasn't just a humiliating spectacle turned victory, it was a reminder of the power of integrity. Ethan, for all his wealth and bravado, had nothing that could diminish her. He represented every voice of doubt she had ever faced, and she silenced him with nothing but the purity of her craft. To anyone watching her story, Lily's message was clear: never let someone else define your worth. The world is full of Ethan Blackwell types who project their insecurities onto others to feel powerful, but true power comes from staying rooted in who you are and letting your passion speak louder than their ridicule. As Lily gently closed the piano lid and placed her hands on the worn wood, a serene smile graced her face. Her journey was just beginning, but she felt a newfound sense of purpose and confidence guiding her forward. In the days that followed, the events at the restaurant became something of a local story. Patrons who had witnessed her performance shared the tale, and word began to spread. A few days later, Lily received a call from a man who had been dining that night, a music producer visiting from Nashville. He wasn't offering fame or fortune, but a chance to record a demo, a step towards something she had only dared to dream of. Lily agreed, not because she believed it would change her life overnight, but because it felt like a door opening, one she wasn't afraid to walk through. Through Lily's inspiring journey, we witness the incredible power of resilience and authenticity in the face of adversity. What about you? What aspirations have you been hesitating to pursue because of fear or doubt? Don't wait for someone like Ethan to challenge your abilities. Take that first step toward your passion today and let your true self shine. Lily's story is a testament to the strength that comes from staying true to oneself and refusing to be diminished by others' negativity. If her triumph over adversity resonates with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and triumph. Share this story with friends and family to spread the message that no dream is too big and no obstacle insurmountable. Your journey could be the next to inspire others to embrace their talents and overcome their fears. Thanks for watching.